So welcome everyone. I'm Lisa Marcus, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm part of the Portals of Perception team. So thank you so much for being with us today. It's always great to gather together as community, and we're always into a new exploration of what it means to be alive at this moment on this planet and how together we can make a difference in this unfolding, fascinating future that offers so many questions. And that's what we're going to get to today as we start to look at the epochal moment. So we're going to go on for 2 hours. And again, great to see you all, and off we go. So I will turn it over to you, Aviv.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you all for coming. Welcome to Portals of Perception. The way today is going to play out is we're actually going to invite your intuitions about this epochal moment right at the beginning. So, and we will do this by inviting you to drop into chat in a moment a response to the stem about why is this an epochal moment. And I will then offer an overview specifically with 8 key premises about this epochal moment. And inside that, endeavor to, at a high level, describe one more time the sevenfold fractal of the epoch, that idea. And within that, do a very high level, briefest possible description of the blue operating system with some nuances specifically relevant for today. And we will then take that as the scaffold, as the foundation for the exploration of today, where the angle of interest for us is renewal. Where do we see renewal in our own lives? What does it mean to upgrade and renew what we're describing as the modern blue operating system, and how it is that the place to begin is actually inside ourselves, each one of us. And we will explore that in rooms for a brief segment, probably groups of 3s, an opportunity to mix with other people. I know some people are always a little timid, but there is nothing like being parachuted into rooms with 2 other friends, perhaps you're meeting for the first time, to listen and actually engage from your own discovery. Because this is not so much a teaching situation as it is us together witnessing the experience of being alive at this time. When we come back from rooms, we'll engage your voices, and I will then offer a starter blueprint for the renewal and regeneration of what we are describing in the idea of an operating system. So that's the flow for today. The place to begin is to share with you that we published this this essay last weekend, this epochal moment. And at that time, we gathered with a circle of friends to read through it from beginning to end. It took us 4 hours because there were many moments where we paused and had a conversation and reflected. And when we completed reading through the document, Sarah, my wife, and I went for a walk here in the Pacific Northwest. And she turned to me and she said, in the 41 years that we've been together and I've been reading sometime what you write and listening to what you say, this is maybe the most foreboding and concerning thing I've ever read from you. Because if I read deeply what you are describing here, not just the idea of the meta crisis, but what's underlying it, and this idea of a shift that's underway. Are we doomed? Is the story you're communicating here is that humanity is doomed? At which point I turned to her and I said, well, you have known me for many years. There's never been a time in my adult life that I've been as optimistic and hopeful and confident about humanity's capacity to redeem itself and regenerate itself through the crisis underway. But it doesn't mean it will all be pretty, not at all. The coming decade or more presents us with a cycle that sometimes is described as a reckoning, and which we are describing here as an epochal moment, where a major shift is underway. And it is that clarity that affords me the confidence to offer this writing in the context of the endeavor of portals of perception, where we are seeking to track where the future is arising with all of us, in between us and inside us. So it is that sentiment of clarity and confidence and the humility that we are all swimming in enormous unknown, and at the same time that within that there is a certain pattern that's unfolding now for humanity, that we are participating inside and with, and it is that we are looking here to explore. So with that, let me bring the first slide and invite your engagement and participation. This, by the way, is what the AI engine generated for us as an image when we said, create for us, please, something that describes the gravity of this moment and the intensity of change. So it took an image like that. And what I would like now to do is to invite you, and perhaps Rob, you can give us 60 seconds music in the background, as if you feel ready to drop into chat a build on this stem. This is an epochal moment, because just listen to your intuition. Whatever comes up for you, no one has monopoly about truth or wisdom. It's very multifaceted. We would like to bring that awareness from the kaleidoscope of awareness of all of us. I will go quiet, let Rob play, and let you drop into chat a phrase that means for you something about this epochal moment. Yeah, let's give it another moment, please. Don't be too shy. Please share your thoughts. So, Sophia offers because humans today seem to recognize faster than previous times the good from the evil. Matthew offers, because people are beginning to discover the wonder of the human complex that they live in. Let's have a few more responses. Why is this an epochal moment, please? And Perry offers, it is a game-changing. Boaz is writing, things not working anymore. Right, get to it. Mona offers, this is an epochal moment because humanity is fast approaching a pivot point that can define future possibility. Susan offers, the world is shifting into a new era, and those energies of the old era are fighting to maintain their power. The world is getting another opportunity to shift, just as it did 100 years ago. Right? Peter is offering, it requires an active response from us individually and communally rather than a passive response. Chris is writing, because what has kept things seemingly stable over time is no longer able to be counted on. And another Peter is writing, apart from all the knowledge and references, which of course have its place, things seem worse than ever and better than ever, both at the same time. Yeah, beautiful. Denise is offering, governmental systems have been captured by powerful economic self-serving entities that seek to subjugate rather than empower people. Right. And another offering here is what worked before stopped working, and simply repairing doesn't seem to do the job. Right. Another offer from Perry, the ongoing great extinction in flora and fauna is occurring now. And Helena writes, because in this beautiful moment in time, I see that humanity has the ability to grow responsiveness towards a better future or not. Our choice, our possibility. Abe is writing, current systems inside and outside of self seems not sustainable. I'll read two more. The melting is accelerating into a local peak because we are losing the grip on objective reality from Mika. And some more fascinating messages here to read. Okay, one more here. This is clearly a time of culmination in the appeared realms. Question is, are we culminating similarly? Human is the holding during the time of octave change. Without that, we will not be in resonance with the high. Okay, tremendous amount of wisdom here. I'm going to read also this from Shanaz Ali. We are becoming more aware of things which we were not aware of due to social media, which makes us different, which makes us see different perceptions. Okay, more to read here. Thank you. This offers me a wonderful bridging into the kind of exploration we are seeking to develop. So yes to the collective wisdom and intelligence that we begin with. So let me offer 8 premises in this epochal moment. And again, I'll go through this rather swiftly, and at other times there is more about some of this content in various conversations on portals. Some of it is probably going to appear here today for the first time. It's just the nature of what we are involved in. Well, so the first premise we are describing is the idea that the modern system is breaking down, that the meta-crisis is intensifying, and that we are watching a gradual collapse of the modern system that developed after and in the context of the Enlightenment over the last several centuries, in what we have known as the modernity project. And when we describe the meta-crisis, some people use the term polycrisis to simply note that there are many different crisis points all over the world. The idea of a meta-crisis describes how they are interlinked and the wicked, complex nature of those different challenges. And therefore, the intimation is that you can't solve just an energy or just a climate issue without addressing the leadership and the human condition issue and so on and so forth. What we're about to reflect and what we are asserting in this epochal moment is that there is an underlying cause and a dimension that is a unifying, invisible, platforming foundation for all these. And we frame it really that along the crisis, we are in the middle of a significant evolutionary update, and that this evolutionary transition plays out in a sevenfold epochal fractal, which I'm about to describe, and that we are inside the indigo-violet intensification. The modern project that emerged through the 17, 18, 19 into the 20th century was the primacy of the blue phase of the epoch, and the proposal we make is that from the middle of the 20th century we have entered the indigo phase, and in the last 2 decades we are into the indigo-violet intensification. So now to place this in context, what I'm describing is an idea that is not a new theory about how things work. It actually is a natural observation of how everything works on planet Earth, especially when it involves biological systems that begin and go through a full life cycle until they come to either their completion or death, or where they change their form to something else. And so what I'm describing, if you like, is an operating system of an epoch. When we say that, we also suggest that this sevenfold system is an operating system that plays out for us in every day, perhaps in every moment, and through the week and through the months and through the year, in small and large systems. So when I use the term operating system, what's a way to concretize it? Well, we are each of us living in a human body, and part of the operating system of a human body is the inhale-exhale function. If we don't have the inhale-exhale function, we can't sustain this body. So you can surmise that the inhale-exhale is one dimension of the operating system of the human body, of the human system. When you look outside, you experience the cyclicality of the day and the night. And if you want to be a little more detailed in it, you'd say, well, there is the sunrise that leads into the day, and then there is the sunset that leads into the night. You describe it as a fourfold. And actually, in one of the recent portals into the soul chapters that we released, I described the 24 sequence of the day and night with a sevenfold process that is congruent and aligns with what we are about to describe here. So this is the idea of an operating system, and let me now describe the sevenfold natures. It essentially says that everything that begins with some kind of an impulse, originating impulse, that is catalyzing that development. Now, that can be the case if you decide to build a business. You'll have an idea, that's you entering the red phase of originating the impulse. But it is also true that the birthing point of life comes in this sevenfold process through the arising that occurs in red, and then it expands into the larger territory and begins to discover where it can play and how it can be nourished by that. And when I observed closely and lovingly my now 18 months young grandson, it's a joyous and fascinating experience to watch him go through the red and the orange and then into the yellow. I think is beginning to sense some aspects of yellow, where he is beginning to orchestrate himself and align himself in the environment, because he can now run and pull things and put things together. So there is a beginning of the yellow functionality, but that will enter even more so in age 3 and 4, where he begins to assimilate more of the environment and corresponds with the environment when he discovers the beauty of language. In the case of green, what green does is green brings the regeneration, the renewal, the energizing element. And again, whether it's you building a not-for-profit organization or business, or whether you build relationship, any biological living system will go through these. And the point we are actually asserting is that it happens as a fractal within a fractal. Sometime you will be in a green phase inside the orange cycle. And in a similar way is the case of the epoch unfolding. The blue representation is when a system has reached a point that it integrated new expression, new capacity, new energetic impulse, and now it needs to build some coordination, some systemized approach. In a business context, you may have been a founder of a startup, and green is where you got some large deals and the business is now really viable and successful, and all of a sudden you're employing 60 or 70 or 100 or a few hundreds of people, and you realize, oh, I better bring here some professional management, because I was the idea person, but I need some people to help me actually manage this system. And in the epochal sense, that is what we are describing, that started to reveal itself alongside the green that emerged in the Renaissance and with higher education systems, even in the 11th, 12th, 13th century, but then took with the Magna Carta and then with the Constitutional Convention the entry into the modern blue operating system, which was about systemizing and enabling what became the modern project of free democracies, free economies, and which we quickly discovered were not as free as perhaps we hoped they were going to be, but nevertheless the ethos was there in the background. The indigo phase of the epoch represents the point where the entire experience of the epoch on the run-up to this point is merging and integrating and catalyzing transference to facilitate the phase shift transition that occurs through death or rebirth or both in the violet phase. So again, through the epoch, we will often be able to see a fractal within a fractal. One of the ways to observe the nature of the orange fractal is to study the Roman Empire and the way it expanded through the Mediterranean and Europe. That represent an orange move. And at the same time, you could choose to study the rise of the Roman Empire from the city all the way to the empire that it became, and you'd be able to track within it all those 7 natures. So the idea that we are asserting here, more observing, is that we've been now in a several decades of intensification, of a transitional release phase of the indigo-violet intensification, and that this leads us into what we are describing as an epochal shift, an epochal update, and that what we're describing is a process that will likely intensify with us in the next several decades. So for some of us, this is what we're here, what we bargained, what we contracted. If you believe that you come here to life with a sacred contract, then that is what you showed up here for. That is to say, with all the know-how and the spiritual and personal capacities to play at this time and be a constructive, creative contributor to the journey of humanity through these times of change. The third premise is that the modern blue operating system, which in a minute I will describe, developed with the ethos of the Enlightenment and enabled this idea of collaboration and coordination, and that it has now become stagnated by both sclerotic weight of bureaucracy and by obsolescence bugs. And obsolescence bugs is a way of describing features in the blue operating system that were never meant to be able to withstand the indigo-violet intensification. They're actually meant to facilitate the transition that is now catalyzing, and they are partly the reason we are seeing that the system is indeed breaking down. What we are also asserting is that there is a purpose, there is a developmental purpose, there is an evolutionary purpose in regressive cycles. And the purpose of regressive cycles is that they are designed to actually allow the system to correct an element that was not attended to earlier in the evolutionary story and was not fully integrated in the best, most optimal way. And we experience similar experience in our own moments of trial and tribulations when we are triggered by something. What does it mean that I got triggered by something that somebody said to me? Well, it means I was exposed to an element in my formation that I haven't fully integrated, and I have an opportunity to travel down the timeline to do again the work I need to do to more fully integrate. The same is happening in the epochal process. The challenge, though, the risk is those regressive cycles, if collectively, us humanity, we do not choose wisely, they can cause irreversible destruction. So that's one way to appreciate the significance of this epochal moment. Never so much and so many future generations depended on the few of us that are alive today to guarantee that they have a future. That's me paraphrasing Churchill, I believe, into this epochal moment. So that's the fourth premise. And the fifth premise to integrate into it is the appreciation that the sevenfold epoch insight that we just very swiftly offered dimensions of, what this insight suggests is that with this indigo-violet intensification, we cannot actually restore the modern blue framework the way, say, it operated into the 90s. Many people would say, well, why can't we come back to this moment of peace and prosperity in the 90s? That was the moment after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when Fukuyama, the political scientist in one of the think tanks in Washington, D.C., declared the end of history. What he meant by the end of history, that now liberal democracy will rule for the end of times. He was in a way saying the epoch ended in blue. It didn't have the, dare I say, esoteric insight that the epoch is not going to end in blue. It actually is going to intensify into indigo and violet. And therefore, we saw the beginnings of the cracks of the blue operating system in the late 90s and into the early decades of the 21st century. And so what it says, the insight of the epoch, what it says is, you can't just put the genie back in the bottle. The blue, which is still an important element that humanity must develop into the next phase, it must be updated inside the intensified, more conductive, more connected, much faster indigo-violet environment and ecology. And what it practically means is that all systems, at all levels, we are experiencing and will experience phase shift. We shouldn't be surprised by anything in the coming years and decades, because the system is going through such a tectonic shift. The entire biological system and the energetic system that accompanies and works with and through the biological system and this planet, the entire connected system is going through a massive shift, which is why we are experiencing these changes that we are seeing. Okay, the sixth premise, before I do a quick deep dive on the blue operating system, is to assert that objectivity, neutrality, truth, credibility, dependability, trust, they were some of the interior properties that emerged and became essential to enable the high-functioning blue operating system. These qualities have been on decline in all the most admired institutions in the world. I've been working with and helping some of the largest companies in the world over the last 3 decades, and I've seen how that crisis is experienced there. And what we are proposing is that as the system will find a new equilibrium, we will, together with each other and in all places where we go, human beings, will have to find these capacities, will have to give birth again to trust, to credibility, to the capacity to see things for what they are. So with that, let me offer also a very high-level overview to then offer us that as a foundation to inquire into renewal. As I did in the article, I'm going to describe it from the top down. In actuality, if you follow the natural way of life, it would be told from the bottom up. We're starting from the top down, more from the visible and apparent nature of the 3 spaces of where we experience and express living. And the premise is simply that the economical, cultural, and political aspirations of people represent the 3 dimensions of living a life where groups of people, nations, and globally get to play. Now, the interesting thing about why we describe this in this way in the blue operating system is that if you go to more ancient cultures and you observe the feudal system and say the monarchy, those were not separated. The economical, the political, and the cultural powers and playing arenas were one and the same. It is really the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and the ethos of serving the greater good to the greater number of people with the ideal of human freedom that brings to life this recognition that these three are meant to arise independent of each other. And it is curious that after the First World War, in 1919, few people approached Rudolf Steiner, who was leading the anthroposophical movement, and asked him to offer guidance. What would be a new way to establish society and run Germany? And he offered this idea, which he called threefolding. And in offering that, he did not develop a new theory about how human beings should organize. It was more him observing that humanity reached a maturation point in what we are describing as the evolution of a modern operating system, where ideally these three ought to be allowed to arise independent of each other so they can truly facilitate the aspirations of people. It didn't work. And why it didn't work? Well, perhaps in one way, society was not as mature as he hoped it would be. And also it is possible to observe that some of the bugs that were capturing the system were already apparent. In the larger context, the threefolding of living expression was to be governed and facilitated by the idea of the three branches of government that were initially articulated by Montesquieu, a philosopher in the 18th century, who recognized that you've got to have a legislative power to make the laws and have a separate executive branch that carries out these laws and a judicial branch that will evaluate the laws, which really shaped the example of how that was developed in the Constitutional Convention in America, in Philadelphia. And the sense of that was that as we saw the experiment that was arising through different nations, different countries all over the world adapted it more fully or less fully. And that has been part of the experiment that humanity has been in. But when you ask at a deeper level, what are the ideals, what were the inspirations for that, you discover that the ideals and the values that shaped the governing of this threefolding, three branches of government and three spaces of living expression, well, it was the ethics and the morals of the Enlightenment and the belief systems that arose at this time about what is good and what is right, and how those shaped the rule of law, the human rights, free speech, and the ethos of enabling some kind of an objective way to resolve issues and conflicts such that people can truly unleash their aspirations, their talent, and their capacity. And finally, the one layer underlying that, when you ask, well, what were the sources, what were the perceptions, what were the beliefs that shaped these morals and ethics, you come to recognize that it's the metaphysics and the epistemology that shaped and arose through the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. In the sense of what somebody will say, what if I don't have metaphysics? Well, if you believe that the world is only physical and material, that's your metaphysics. Okay? Metaphysics is a word that describes what are the core beliefs that we uphold about what is real, and the epistemic framework that we hold in our head is what we assert and believe is true. The final thing in it is that when the system works right, it is tethered to life, it is connected to life. What we saw increasingly in recent centuries and in recent decades is you've got a lot of movement in the upper layers of the system, but as we move to modern life and urban living, many people got more and more distant from the natural flow of life. So this was just one reason as to why the system began to be captured. The 3 living spaces were captured by bureaucratic weight and by economic powers, as one of you wrote in the earlier comments, such that the system is locked and is not geared to facilitate the liberation of all talents in the best, most optimal way. We saw that in many countries all over the world, we see that the idea of a separation of powers is captured again because often the economic powers, few large economic powers are able to capture the legislative and the executive and sometimes the judicial branch of government, and often are therefore driven by certain ideological capture that is also itself is inspired by some kind of a reductionist view or self-interest view. So no longer do we have a metaphysics and epistemology that is ready to be updated and reformed, as we will invite in a moment, but rather it is locked at all levels of the system. That is, if you extrapolate it to its fullness, and also position us in a place where we see that we are much more separated from the replenishing well-being and the replenishing energies, biological energies, natural energies, and spiritual energies that would have the capacity to unleash renewals at all these levels. So I bring this appreciation to now finally add the 2 last premises. The 7th premise, suggesting that in light of that, what we are now seeing in this epochal moment, we're seeing all over the world new experiments, new arisings, new kind of endeavors, each exploring in their way a sense of renewal. Some are solving local problems, some are seeking to create local solutions, new economic models, new communal, spiritual, and cultural renewals. Those are each pioneering in their way, with their framework, with their language, and they are diverse. And yet, if you look deeply into them, especially where they are able to be successful, they are propelled by the sacred sentiments that accompany life. And there is attunement to universal value. And they ultimately, intuitively or overtly share a sense of urgency that we cannot solve the challenges we face, that is, humanity cannot solve the challenge we face with the same mindset, the same tool set that created these challenges. And so therefore, it brings me to today to propose that our work today begins internally, with each one of us working on upgrading and updating our interior operating system. We need to discover what is the nature of our interior operating system. And we may even drop the word operating and change the language to call it living system. As we do so, language will be important in the updating process. And what is it we need to do to facilitate renewal so that we can become agents of upgrading, change, and elevating renewal into our own lives and into the networks and communities that we participate in, where we can choose to apply the subsidiarity principle. The subsidiarity principle is another element that is observed in the Blue operating system when it works as it was meant to be. And what it simply says is that a challenge, a problem is always, or anything is always addressed at the nearest level that it can be addressed. So it's the invitation to empower each one of us to take charge, take responsibility to our own lives. It's the principle that says that if we can solve something inside our own family, we solve it with the people around the table. If there is an issue in the block where we live, in the neighborhood, we go and try to solve it there. It's the issue that it's the view that says, don't wait for some world government to solve everything for you. And also, we're not looking for a world government to replace, supplant all the local governments, countries have a role in the future. But it says that certain issues need to be solved at a regional level, certain at a country level, and certain global issues can only be addressed at a collaborative level, such as we experienced at the beginning of this decade with the pandemic, because it needed global coordination. And there is a variety of global crises that cannot be solved in any local address because they require us to coordinate. And one of the things we assert is that right now, when we need more coordination and collaboration at the global level, because of this epochal transition, we are less likely to find the capacity to coordinate. So where we focus today in this event is this idea that we are each a blue operating system unto ourselves. And so therefore, if we are to reconnect with life, and if we are to facilitate metaphysical, epistemological, ethical, and moral renewal, such that we can bring certain universal principles and the permanent life connection, the tethering to life, such that we become an agent of life into whatever circumstance we operate in, that begins with each one of us and continues with how we operate together with each other, with an inquiry about the universal human sentiments. And I'm not asserting that I have a magic formula for those. That's something that needs the shared inquiry of people from all over the world if we are ever to see the kind of change that will permeate the economical, political, and cultural system. Friends, what we're describing here is, if you like, the project of the next 100 years. Certainly, the sense of the coming decade is that we are in a critical reckoning time, a coming decade or two, and that this work begins with each one of us. And the inquiry of today is, how can blue be upgraded and renewed inside and through the indigo-violet transition and intensification? So I said quite a bit here. I think what I want to do is, rather than take comments here, is actually carry everything that I offered as a foundation to go into rooms, to spend in rooms 12 minutes. You're free to comment on anything I just offered as a foundation. I want to invite us to share with each other what gives you hope. There's crisis all over the place, and I began today by describing how I turned to Sarah, my wife, said to me, are you describing the end of the world? And I said, no, there are many people who describe this as the end of days. There's many faith and belief systems that describe that, but what I believe we are in the midst of is an epochal shift. And it's not always easy to find signs of hope, depends where you are in the world, but I'd invite you that you have a free conversation about what gives you hope and where and how you already are engaging in renewal opportunities, small or large. When we come back, we'll have a bit of a free range with everything, including what I offered as a foundation. And I will then, in the second part, also with your voices, I will also bring a starter blueprint for renewal. So how about that as a transition place? I know some people feel timid about dropping into rooms with people you've never met before, but what a place to begin practicing the kind of renewal of a blue operating system. So please let us play, let us discover, and I will see you in 12 minutes. Thank you.